This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
And welcome to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network, X-Zone TV, and on shortwave. If you'd like to give us a call, our toll-free number is 1-877-528-8255. That's toll-free throughout the U.S., Canada, Alaska, and Hawaii. My email address is xzone@talkstarradio.com. On MSN Messenger, talkstarradio@hotmail.com. And our websites, www.xzoneradio.com and www.xzonetv.com. My guest this hour is Philip Cook, and we're going to be talking about his new book entitled Abused Men, The Hidden Side of Domestic Violence. Mr. Philip Cook is a noted journalist who has received awards for his reporting from the Associated Press and the Professional Journalism Society, amongst others. His work objectively examines and explains relevant research results, the feelings and problems of interviewed victims, and provider and media response to the issue. He has examined scores of national and international domestic violence and family programs and evaluated their potential for helpful replication. His presentations on the subject of male abuse victims have received high praise from a diverse spectrum of society, such as Dear Abby, leading domestic violence experts, attorneys, physicians, law enforcement, and numerous mental health professionals. He has served as a founding board member of Stop Abuse for Everyone, an organization dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence regardless of gender or sexual orientation. Mr. Cook has appeared on numerous national radio and television shows such as MSNBC, Fox TV's The Crier Report, The O'Reilly Factor, Montel Williams, The Home and Family Show, and many others. He is the author of the pioneering book Abused Men, The Hidden Side of Domestic Violence. His articles on domestic violence have been published in several publications, including the Journal of Human Behavior in the Social Environment and the book Family Interventions in Domestic Violence, a handbook of gender-inclusive theory and treatment. And Pat and Philip Cook, welcome to the X-Zone. Thanks for joining us tonight, Philip.
Well, thank you very much.
Male abuse, abused men, the hidden side of domestic violence. Are there any statistics when it comes to how many men are actually being abused?
Well, yes, there certainly are. Of course, it depends on the survey, how many people are being surveyed, and so on. It wouldn't be a great interest to you to, go into all the details of all the surveys. Most of them, the majority of them, which number well over 200 now, these are, surveys done, the representative sample, the population, show that abuse is a 50-50 proposition when it comes to intimate partner violence.
50-50.
There is one exception to that in terms of a major national survey, and that is the National Violence Against Women survey, which found that 36% of the victims are male.
Philip, please stand by. You and I have to take our commercial break for this segment. www.abusedmen.com. Exonation, if you'd like to give us a call and ask our very special guest any questions, 1-877-528-8255 is the toll-free number throughout the U.S., Canada, Alaska, and Hawaii. Philip Cook is my guest this hour. His new book is Abused Men, The Hidden Side of Domestic Violence. And once again, his website is www.abusedmen.com. Philip and I will return on the other side of this 2-minute break as the X-Zone continues live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network, X-Zone TV, and on shortwave from our studios in beautiful Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
This is Johanna Carroll, host of Dialogue with Divinity on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. While walking along Kaanapali Beach in Maui this past year, I kept discovering all these shells and coral in the shape of hearts. My dialogue with Divinity was very simple. Do you want me to do a retreat to heal people's hearts in Maui next year? And of course, the answer was yes. As a master spiritual teacher, I am offering you a neat retreat called Rise, May 8th through the 12th, 2017, and the chance of a lifetime to rest at a 5-star resort for 5 days and experience a spiritual renewal of your heart and soul. Kaanapali is one of the top 5 beaches in the world. This stunning resort has undergone a $40 million renovation. I walked the entire property, checked out the room choices on your behalf, and I must say it is stunning. Our conference room faces the ocean with sliding glass doors. Maui is known as Mother Maui because it is a soft, gentle, healing energy. In the embrace of Mother Maui, you will feel yourself rising from the limitations of an ordinary life to an extraordinary journey of peace, bliss, and harmony. A greater sense of clarity. Our Rise retreat ignites renewal in the sacred elements of air, water, earth, fire, and wind. There's plenty of free time to enjoy all that Maui has to offer. A small deposit is required now to reserve your space, as this retreat, it will sell out. For more details, please go to johannacarroll.com and register today. Aloha, and I'll see you in mystical Maui.
Philip Cook is our special guest. He is the author of Abused Men, The Hidden Side of Domestic Violence. And, you know, Philip, when you think of domestic violence, you think of women being abused. But we've done a number of shows on domestic violence on women, and I receive email from men saying, Rob, you've got to do a show on abused men because we're out there. Why is the topic of abused men so hushed?
Well, I suppose it depends on who is doing the hushing.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly, since my book was first published, I'm about to do an update on it some 10 years later now, should be out later this year. I'm not changing a whole bunch, just, adding some new information. It's not that men won't tell, no one asks. And I don't know of any abused women who shout it from the rooftops, do you? Of course not. It's a private matter. It's, it's a difficult family situation, a lot of reasons and so on. But women have the public acknowledgement that it occurs.
Mm-hmm.
They have shelters and crisis lines to go to seek help. There's someone who cares enough to ask. You go into the doctor's office, there's a little card there, with a list of helping lines and so on for women. They don't even have to be asked. There's a card they can pick up. The equivalent doesn't exist for men.
Why not?
If it's not that men won't tell, but they're not asked.
Why not?
Why aren't those cards and stuff exist, you mean?
Why aren't men getting the same acknowledgement that men might have a problem just like women do?
Well, I guess it's because, plain and simple, sexual discrimination, isn't it?
Well, that's what it seems like.
Well, of course it is. It's pretty obvious. What man is going to call the women's crisis line? Now, the women's crisis line may have a policy that says they, help men who might call, but there's a big sign out front that says, well, you're not welcome. I don't see any difference between a whites-only club. Do you? I don't. I mean, discrimination.
Discrimination is discrimination.
The same, doesn't
it? Exactly. But is it something in our society that looks at a man and says, "Come on, how can you be abused by a woman?"
Well, yeah, but there aren't any rules. I don't know of any rule book. Let me give you two quick examples.
Okay.
And these are two good examples because everybody knows these two couples. Everybody in the world knows them. They even know something about the house they lived in. Now, the incidents happen to be 150 years apart, but it's instructive. Abe was a very tall man, well over 6 foot, kind of thin, but in pretty good shape from his young days as a man splitting wood. Mary Todd, short, plump. She used to beat him regularly, hit him, strike at him with her fist, kick him, denigrate just about everything he did, and sometimes she'd even throw firewood. Now, if one of those pieces of firewood would have hit him in the right place, John Wilkes Booth would not be a famous name today. Now, that's consistent battering, what we call battering, in the classic sense, continuous abuse, denigration over a long period of time. And that's one form of battering. There's the other type, which we call, incidental, okay, the one-time kind of thing. So the story there is Bill and Hillary. Well, Bill had an affair with an intern. It eventually became public. And when it became public, Hillary threw a lamp at him and struck him hard enough to leave a red mark on his face. Now, one would think that is a one-time incident. Nonetheless, it's also spousal abuse or intimate partner violence. And there are two types and a big spectrum there, isn't there?
Yes.
And that's what we need to realize about domestic violence against men or women. One size does not fit all.
Now
and merely because men generally are bigger physically doesn't mean they can't be abused. There are men who are going to bed tonight all across Canada, the United States, and across the world who are hiding the knives before they go to bed. Now, women make up for that size and weight differential by using weapons twice as often and so on. The old stereotype of a wife with a frying pan or a rolling pin, is true, in other words. The real picture of domestic violence is this. Half the time it's mutual combat. A quarter of the time, only the man is violent. A quarter of the time, only the woman is violent. We're not treating domestic violence in total as it really is. Mutual combat is ignored, and certainly abuse against men is ignored. If we want to come to grips with the issue, we need to look at what the research actually does show, recognize there's a range of actions that takes place. Our interventions need to reflect that range of actions.
Now, what are some of the signs that a man is in an abusive situation?
The exact same signs as when a woman is. Unexplained injuries, depression, withdrawing from friends and family, and that's a common one. Because controlling behavior is often a part of abuse, but it's not always. So that's certainly one typical sign. In other words, withdrawing from friends and family is the most outside that people outside the family can see. When that is present, that's a strong indicator.
It's a red flag. What about psychological abuse?
Well, certainly that's part of it. My book concentrates, on the physical side, primarily because that's a lot easier to measure than the psychological side, obviously.
Yes.
But you can measure it, but it's there's not as many studies, of course. And obviously, I'm trying to make a point that physical abuse does occur to males by women. So that's the primary concentration. But all the men I interviewed, and have interviewed since the book came out, which, number several hundred now, I think, or have contacted me or so on, when I've gotten into the depth of their story, all of them say pretty much consistently the same thing women say. That, yes, the physical abuse was very damaging and hurtful, but the emotional abuse was the thing that really stayed with them and hurt more.
How do the authorities react to men who call up and file reports of physical abuse?
Well, it's been bad and getting slightly better. In the 10 years since Abused Men, the Hidden Side of Domestic Violence came out, which is really a popularization of the scientific research. That was my intent. There's certainly been a revolution. I'm rewriting the book now, and when I wrote the one chapter heading, it was called No Movement for Abused Men. Well, now I can say the movement for abused men, because there is some. Stop Abuse for Everyone, domestic abuse hotline for men and women, so on and so forth. When the book was written 10 years ago, there was one shelter in the entire United States that would serve men. Now there are perhaps a dozen, maybe a little less than that. A number of crisis lines that have opened up for men have increased as well. So there has been some, movement in terms of the service provider industry. Not enough, but some. In terms of the police, they're caught in a real funny kind of quandary. It's difficult to estimate the arrest of domestic violence by gender in the United States. In fact, it can't be done. The New York Times tried to do it, and I did a survey too, okay? The breakdown by gender doesn't exist, okay, in terms of the data. So we can't tell you. But we did a spot check, and my best guess estimate is that the arrest rates for women now average about 25% among all domestic violence perpetrators in the United States. So that doesn't match what the surveys show in terms of the amount, but that's certainly a big increase from the 10% of 10 years ago.
Why do men stay in abusive relationships?
Well, the same reason women do. One, the first thing you ask a man or a woman caught in this situation is the obvious question, which is, why don't you leave? The very first thing that will come out of their mouths is, but I still love him or her. That's number one. Number two, children. They want to stay together for the sake of the children.
Right.
Many men, of course, now they may not know much about the legal sphere, they may not know much about abused men, what happens to them, and so on and so forth, but they've heard from their buddies one thing, and this they're convinced of. You can talk to them wherever you might meet men, that their chances of getting custody or even good visitation against a controlling, abusive, vindictive spouse is not too good. And so the very fact that men may lose all contact with their children forever is a pretty good inhibitor against leaving even a violent and controlling and abusive relationship. So that's a big one. Economics, as it is for women, is certainly part of it. There's an economic cost to divorce and separation that's pretty severe. So that's a consideration.
To your knowledge, Philip, have you spoken to any men who have actually been successful in prosecuting abusive wives?
Yes. I'll give you an example.
Why don't we do this? I've got to take my news break. When we come back, please give me an example. I've got a couple of emails here from listeners who are asking me, is the justice system pro-men, or are they just looking at men as, okay, you should be able to take care of it, don't waste the court's time with this? We'll talk more about this on the other side of this commercial break with the news as the X-Zone continues on the Talkstar Radio Network, X-Zone TV, and on shortwave from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. In the next hour, X-Zone Nation, this cold has gotten the best of me. I will be replaying the hour we did last Tuesday night with Alexandra Holzer, the daughter of famed parapsychologist Hans Holzer. My name is Rob McConnell, and this is the X Zone on the Talkstar Radio Network. Don't go away, we'll be back.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. This portion of the X Zone is being brought to you by Carolyn Bartz. She is the author of Secrets of Cat Attitude Revealed, and you can see her ad on page 41 of this edition of the X Chronicles newspaper. And for more information, you can send Carolyn an email, catsecretsforyou@earthlink.net. 1-877-528-8255 is toll free. My name's Rob McConnell, and this is the Talkstar Radio Network. My guest this hour is Philip Cook. We're talking about abused men, the hidden side of domestic violence, and his website is www.abusedmen.com. When it comes to the prosecution of a spouse being charged with domestic violence, are the courts lenient on them, or do they give them the same treatment that they would give a male?
Well, the statistics, of course, we don't have. I can tell you this, that in terms of all crime, women serve less time than men do. The more serious the crime, the greater the disparity. When you get to the top end of the crime that may be committed, women serve an average of 3 years less than do men for the same type of crime. That's across all crime. So one would suspect, of course, the same phenomena exist in terms of domestic violence. In terms of police and prosecutors and courts and so on, we can't judge it with any scientific certainty, in other words, however. We can just go by anecdotal experience. However, with police throughout the nation experiencing, say, at least a 20% arrest rate for women, despite the very gender-biased training they get, and that's one of the biggest problems. Nonetheless, police and courts are faced with the reality that confronts them. So there's been some adjustment in the last 10 years. Not an adequate enough adjustment, but there has been some adjustment. Certainly, a man who wishes to prosecute or get others, not wishes to prosecute, but get the prosecutors to prosecute, faces a higher threshold, without a doubt. And many attorneys have, told me this. So, in my book, there is, specific advice about this for a man facing this problem, and certainly they need to, find the right attorney and get their ducks in a row, so to speak, to a somewhat greater extent than women do. And women, of course, have access to shelter workers and victim advocates and so on, which, may not be available at all to men.
But if men are being abused just like women are, isn't the law being not equal?
Well, of course.
So what can we do to change it? What needs to be done?
Well, many things. Here's a shocker for you. And this is the case in 21 states, actually. There are these things called BIPs, Batterer Intervention Programs.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Our jails are full, obviously. First-time offender, jail may not be the, without a felony conviction, which is people get referred to this, may not need a jail sentence. So they go to classes instead, class jail. They plead guilty, get on probation for a year, and go to a 26 to 56-week class. Well, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like a great
sounds
plan.
okay. Sounds like a fair idea.
Yeah.
They don't work. The National Institute of Justice has determined these programs have no effect whatsoever in terms of reducing repeat offenses. But every state in the nation, Canada too, has these programs. And they don't work. Not to reduce repeat offenses at all. And the reason they don't work is because they're based on a model that doesn't make any sense. It's called a power and control Duluth model, to be exact. Not that anybody cares or would know. But the point is, it's all about male patriarchy being the cause of domestic violence. Well, of course, the real causes are personality, family upbringing, substance abuse, poor anger management, communication skills, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the 21 states that have adopted guidelines for such programs, the majority of them have things, and here's I'm quoting from one state. Programs that emphasize the primary cause of domestic violence being mental illness, anger, or substance abuse shall not be encouraged, and in fact are prohibited from being taught. Now, doesn't that make your mouth drop open? What? Anger, substance abuse, and mental illness cannot be considered causes of domestic violence, according to state law. That's
According
nuts.
to state law. Certainly it's nuts.
It's absurd. It's laughably absurd.
It makes no sense at all.
Of course it doesn't. And I don't think the general public knows that their state legislatures and generally the Attorney General of each of these states has passed such regulations. No, male patriarchy is the only cause. Power and control is the only cause. Well, we know that power and control exist, as a causative factor in a certain percentage of domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
It does, But that's not all. Sometimes it's just Hillary whacking Bill.
The Bill
It isn't Abe and Mary Todd all the time. There's a range, right? Individual circumstances matter. One size does not fit all. And these absurd prohibitions against including even mental illness as a cause is ridiculous as well. These programs don't even screen and track for substance abuse. We know that alcohol, in particular, is a primary factor.
Definitely.
Of course. And yet, you could go through these programs typically without having been screened or referred to for substance abuse or mental illness. In other words, Ted Bundy, a charming serial killer, would fly right through such programs no problem because, and get this, mental health therapist certification licensed people, right, are not required to run the programs. In fact, they're discouraged from running such programs.
All right, so I know I'm going to regret asking this. So who is running the program?
Primarily advocates from the domestic violence coalitions around the state and nation. Your state domestic violence coalition, basically the people who participate in that, are primary advocates, run the training programs for the so-called counselors who then run the programs. And they're the ones who help the Attorney General with some sort of citizens panel set up the guidelines, which prohibit all these, discussions and looking at substance abuse as a cause of domestic violence and so on. So it's all male patriarchy, you see.
All right. So,
and society that molds this as opposed to individual circumstance.
All right. So let me see if I understand this right. According to legislators,
mm-hmm.
the only cause for domestic abuse is the man, not alcohol, not mental illness, not drugs.
Right, nor anger.
Or anger. And then we have counselors
Who aren't licensed.
Taking care of the anger management classes, I would imagine.
Which don't work.
Which don't work.
Which do nothing, absolutely nothing, no effect whatsoever, according to the National Institute of Justice, in reducing the recidivism rate of perpetrators.
So I would imagine that the repeat offender rate when it comes to domestic violence is rather high.
Yes. Well, it depends. In other words, if it's a one-time incident, Bill and Hillary, no. And I think Bill and Hillary, or the equivalent thereof, need counseling, right? And I don't think Hillary needs to be arrested. Okay? Now, if that was in the small White House instead of a big White House, right, and the police came, she would have had to been, because there would have been a visible mark on his face. And that's the law in the majority of states. Mandatory arrest, which is another mistake. Because, I don't think Hillary needs to be arrested. I think you ask most people, and I have, at least in a non-scientific way, person on the street poll, 30, 40 people, right?
Right.
And they said, no, I don't think she should have been arrested.
Well, I agree with that.
Yeah. Now, in other words, they got a lot more common sense than the legislators do.
Well,
now, Mary Todd, yes, absolutely. Today, we'd probably qualify her as bipolar with a severe mental disorder. An arrest, very appropriate there. It was consistent, long-term. It was battering, no doubt about it. And it doesn't matter if it's male or female or male. That just happens to be the historical evidence, and those two in that particular house happen to be female. They're the only ones, right? So, it's just, it's a matter, I suppose, of logic and science versus feelings and assumptions. And we know a lot. I mean, we really know a lot about intimate partner violence, its causes, its implications, the nature, extent, and consequences of it for both genders. We know a lot about family violence in general. And the research is good and substantive and extensive. Hundreds of studies. We need to apply that information to good, sound public policy and some good common sense.
All right, after all the research that you have done and all the people that you've spoken to, in your opinion, what should be done when someone has been arrested and charged with domestic violence? What type of post-sentencing help should they get?
Well, there's nothing wrong with batterer treatment programs, batterer intervention programs, per se. Okay? There are good models that are run by licensed people, okay, in several areas, which evaluate people for substance abuse and mental illness using tools which are easy to do if you're a skilled professional. Okay? That's the first step. I mean, you don't need a sociopath that's not going to be helped by this. You need to find out if they are.
Right.
Okay? That's number one. You got to deal with the substance abuse problem if there is one. That's number two. Okay. And then you look more closely at the individual circumstances, the arrest report, and so on. Okay. And look at what course of action to follow after that point in time. That may mean counseling. That may not mean counseling. That may mean leaving the relationship and encouraging the other person to leave it as soon as possible if it's very severe. You got to talk to the victim and find out their wishes and not ignore them by saying that they're so under control and domination so much of the party that they can't make a rational decision. I think with some time and distance and help, most victims can make a rational decision. We also need to deal with recidivism victims, that is, women and men who return time and time again in the same type of relationship, whether it's the same one or a different one, it's the same kind of thing. We need to help them more effectively as well. That's a critical issue. It's not really being addressed very well. It all depends on the individual circumstances. One size does not fit all. Jail can be a very effective deterrent. It does work. And we know that.
Yeah.
But should Hillary be arrested?
Nah.
For one slap and one missed lamp. Don't think so. But yet our law says you should. What about mutual combat, which is half the time? Half the time it's mutual combat. So what should be done? Well, there's a long list of recommendations. One, you've got to reform the battery intervention program.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, you've got to have good training for law enforcement, not biased advocacy by people who are familiar with the research like myself and many, many others. And the many others are available to Stop Abuse for Everyone website. Lots of people out there, very good. And, have them give some of the training for law enforcement instead of this bias stuff, advocacy-based. That's two. Three, we should re-examine mandatory arrest, for sure. Okay? We need to put... The days are gone, really, when... Not gone entirely. I know some small towns where this is not true still, and there's still a problem. I recognize this, and I know it's true, in which a severely battered woman, can't get any action taken against her husband. It happens. It exists. It's real. Nonetheless, times have changed in the last 30 years.
Definitely. Now, you and I have to take our final break for this hour. Please stand by, Philip. Philip Cook is our special guest. He is the author of Abused Men, The Hidden Side of Domestic Violence, www.abusedmen.com. Philip and I will be back on the other side of this commercial break as the X-Zone continues live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
In over 36 years in law enforcement, I've learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, extraterrestrials, and UFOs, how we gather that evidence of their existence, preserve that same evidence, and present it to a court of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Come with me on a journey that seeks to prove with undisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Join me, Larry Lawson, host of the Paranormal Stakeout, coming to the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Check out the broadcast schedule for Paranormal Stakeout with yours truly, Larry Lawson, at www.xzbn.net. For more information about me, my travels, and my team, check out our website at www.paranormalfbi.com or join us on Facebook at Florida Bureau of Paranormal.
I am Dr. Carl O'Helvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
You're listening to the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
Philip Cook is our special guest this hour. He's the author of Abused Men, The Hidden Side of Domestic Violence. Philip, before we went to the break, I was asking you what we could do, and you were giving us some ideas. Before we go on, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us tonight and for making it possible for men to understand that, men do get abused and there are things that can happen. What should a man do if he is being abused?
Well, first thing, he has to recognize it. Second thing, realize he's not alone. Third thing, sometimes love comes at too high a price. And these are exactly the same things that women need to learn in the same situation. There is no difference. None. Zip. I don't find any difference between men or women in this situation at all.
Abuse is
Only
abuse.
difference is the amount of help they're receiving. And there's the big difference. And the bias and prejudice against them.
If men are listening tonight who need help, what website can they go to?
Well, there is a chapter in my book, Abused Men, that specifically gives men tips. So that's one. Secondly, the Stop Abuse for Everyone, which I'm not going to give you the URL for. It's a little complicated. Okay? Just Google it. Stop Abuse for Everyone, SAFE for short. They have, it's not toll-free, but they have a hotline, and they have local chapters, and they also have some brochures. That's one. The Domestic Abuse Hotline for Men and Women, DAM for short, DAHMW, has a toll-free hotline. So there's two organizations that offer, crisis line help and so on. Secondly, you can call your local crisis line or shelter, your local one, and see if there is a victim advocate available. Also, your county or province in Canada should have also a victims advocate program. Now, unless there's been a prosecution, sometimes the victim advocates aren't available, but they can certainly, be used to get advice from and so on. I find that the victim advocates at the corrections department and police agencies are much less, tend to be, because they recognize the reality of what confronts them in terms of numbers of women being arrested. In other words, they're a bit more realistic.
Philip, I want to thank you very much for joining us tonight. It was great talking to you, and thank you for sharing the experience, and I hope that we have the pleasure of talking to you again on the other great book.
I'd love to do it. Thank you. Anytime.
You've got some great other books, and thank you very much for joining us. Philip Cook has been our special guest of this hour. He's the author of Abused Men, The Hidden Side of Domestic Violence. His website is www.abusedmen.com. From a personal point of view as a former police officer, if you are being abused, there is no justification for it. Dial 911. It's a situation that has to be taken care of. When we come back from the news at the top of the hour, I'll be replaying last Tuesday night's show when I had Alexandra Holzer on with me discussing the paranormal, and I'll be back tomorrow night live, hopefully after I get rid of this cold tonight. Exo Nation, thank you very much for your understanding. Batman, great working with you, and I will see you tomorrow night. Take care of